How you doing? Old man here. Welcome back to the channel. It's pre-spawn season for bass, which means the big guys and the big gals are making their way up to the shallows and getting ready for bed. If you want to catch a giant bass this year, you got to know where they're hiding and what they're biting. What's unique about this video is we're in Florida, and I want to talk about Florida. Whenever I look to find what are bass biting in this time of year, I find a lot of really informational videos, but rarely do they talk about Florida. They always say, well, this applies to everywhere else but Florida. Everywhere. Well, the reason is because Florida, let's face it, is much warmer than everywhere else. They're spawning already here in Florida. So between the pre-spawn and the spawn, that's like a good solid month of catching those bass transitioning. That's what we're going to focus on today. Florida pre-spawn and Florida spawning bass. First thing we're going to talk about, where do you find the bass? As you know, bass right now in the pre-spawn and even the spawning, well, they're going to go to spawning. In pre-spawning, they're transitioning from that winter deep water to the shallows. They do this because their beds are in the shallow water. So first one is staging areas. You want to find the staging areas, grass lines and points, drop-offs. We call them spawn. We're near the spawning flats, near where the bass are going to spawn. Anywhere vegetation, anywhere that there's vegetation, lilies, hydrilla, anywhere that there's grass, those are key spots to find the pre-spawning and the spawning bass. Of course, any canals or creek mouths where that warm water is starting to trickle in, attracting the bait fish, well, the bass are going to follow the bait fish, and that's where we're going to catch them. Talking about lures. What lures do we use to catch the pre-spawning bass this time of year? Today's the 8th of March, by the way, International Women's Day. We're going to talk about that too. It may not seem important to bass fishing, but if you're married, you better make sure your wife's taken care of. First thing, that's number one priority. Because if your wife's not happy, good luck getting out on that boat. Good luck enjoying yourself. So men, take the time, appreciate the wives that you have, the loved ones you have, the women in your life, the significant others. Come on, do our part. Anyway, so the lures. We're going to talk about 5 lures today. The first one is going to be the lipless crankbait. The lipless crankbait is great because you can cover water quickly. And you can find those active fish. This is an example of a lipless crankbait. This is the one with the rattle in it. So this one you can swim it down or let it sink down slowly, kind of reel it in, let it sink back down, reel it in, or steady retrieve it, whatever you want. Again, there's going to be some active times where the bass are more active and other times where the bass aren't that active. So you're going to have to play with your retrieval to make sure you get the right amount of response. But anyway, first one, the lipless crankbait. The second lure we're going to talk about is the jerkbait. Love this guy in Florida. This one's got some rattles in it. Oh man. And let me tell you, those trebles, they are terrible. Anyway, so the way you fish this one, you bring it in, and it resembles like a dying fish. It'll go in the water, stop, let it sit, pull it, jerk it. You get the method. You start playing with it, 2 or 3 jerks, pause, 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, 3, pause. Let me tell you something, the jerkbait, I've caught a lot of fish here in Florida on the jerkbait, and this is the time of year to do it, especially if they're not that active. You'd be surprised. This will often save your day from getting skunked, the jerkbait. The third bait we're going to talk about, just straight up plastics. I grabbed a couple, and I'm going to talk about a couple of ways to fish them. First one we're going to talk about is the wacky rig. That's where you take like a stick worm or a Senko, and you're just going to hook it so it's right in the middle and it just floats down. Well, I wish it doesn't necessarily go that bad. It floats down. Normally on the descent is where it's going to be hit. So you need like a finesse rod, spinner, something you got a lot of feel, because oftentimes you won't even notice they're bitten it or they've got it in their mouth until that line starts to move away. Anyway, I enjoy the wacky rig. I use it often and I get a lot of success with the wacky rig. You can also throw it on like a hook. I've got a weighted hook here, but you can just Ned rig it. Texas rig it. There you go. Where you're just going to put the hook through the bait, cap it with like depending on, again, those happen to be weighted hooks. I can grab this if I got a number 4 hook over here. I don't have my hooks out. Anyway, you can grab just a normal hook and you kind of just put the hook through, put the weight on top, and then, or whatever way you want, put the weight on top and just drag it through. That's another way you can fish those guys. And of course, you know, there are a ton of different plastics, different colors, different sizes. So you got to make sure you match the hook to the bait. Sometimes you'll hear, sometimes you'll hear about speed worms, or worms with a little tail on it. Those have a lot more action. Again, just another variation. You can again do the Texas rig like we just talked about. You could also do a Carolina rig where you're going to have like a 2 foot leader or trailer. You're going to put a swivel on there. You're going to take that swivel, you're going to tie it in, put the trailer on, but on the side of the swivel that goes to your reel, that's where you're going to put a glass bead and a weight. And so that weight and that glass bead will pop when you're dragging it, but the trailing part will have your worm or your creature bait on there, and he's kind of just floating and flopping and dancing around. That's another good lure, or another good way to fish plastics this time of year. This is a creature bait, just a crawl, if you want to see. So it doesn't matter. I mean, all of these plastics work. You may need to play around with colors. You may need to play around with a little bit. But you'll find where they start biting, and it's almost guaranteed you're going to get some action on plastics. My 4th lure I want to talk about are going to be spinners, spinner baits, and chatterbaits. The chatterbait is pretty slick. So it's like a jig, but it's also very similar to a spinner bait and how you fish it. So it flashes, it makes noise, it dances in the water as it goes. Unlike a spinnerbait, you can just drag it. You can fish it constantly where it'll have that action that you want. My goodness, they've kind of taken over when it comes to spinnerbaits. More people use the chatterbait than spinnerbaits. I like to fish mine with a big trailer on the back. Like for example, I'd put this crawl on there and have it set up like this. Anyway, that's the chatterbait. So that's one. Spinnerbaits. Now there's a huge assortment of spinnerbaits. This one just happens to be one with a trailer already on there. This has the willow blade. I'm telling you, any spinnerbait, whatever you feel comfortable throwing, it's gonna work. Spinnerbaits are fantastic. Your color selection, I would choose ones that, here's another one with the willow blade. I would choose one that And here's the one with the big Colorado blade on there. But I would choose one that mimic your bait fish, whatever that is near you. Bluegill, shad. If you're in Florida, that's typically what you're going to use. So those kind of colors don't do wrong. But like I said, I've caught a huge amount of bass on chartreuse. I've yet to see a chartreuse fish, so again, I know it's important, but don't waste a lot of time and effort picking. Just try one. If it doesn't work, try something else when it comes to colors. Again, the action is much different between this willow blade and this huge Colorado blade. So keep that in mind as you fish. You see which one you want a slower retrieval, but you want a lot of action, versus I want, a quicker retrieval, more consolidated action. Those are both good lures. And the final lure is going to be just your straight up jig. Again, this is a weedless jig. I've got a crawl on there. This is great. This has got a little bit of noise, to it. You fish those down and you just jig it. Typically what I'll use this for is if I'm punching or flipping. Punching is I'm taking a big weight. Like here's a typical, let's say this is like a 1/8 worm weight. This is a 1 ounce punch weight. So I'll tie this thing on. It's tungsten, but I'll tie that on, punch right through with my jig, pop it a few times. If I get a response, I'm yanking it out of the weeds. If not, pull it out, go to the next spot. That's real fast, it's real quick. Don't spend a lot of time jigging it up and down. Boop, 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 gone, next spot. So anyway, that's the fifth lure to catch those Prespawn bass. Now, techniques and retrieval tips. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to start with the lipless crankbait, right? You want to slow roll this guy near grass lines, above grass lines. If they start to snag up on something, just rip it right through. But anyway, you want to kind of get this guy where the transitions, a grass transition, point, rocks, something where those bass are going to kind of be hiding out or transitioning to the shallows, to the deeper water. Anyway, that's the place you're going to want to use this guy. And that's the presentation you want to use. For the jerk bait, we talked about that. You're going to want to twitch it. You want to pause it. You want to give them time to get some action, because when you pop this guy, it looks like a dying fish. It just let it pause and rest. That's how you want to do that guy. Like drop-offs, you want to focus it on drop-offs, any holes, any place that's going to trigger a response. If bass are like suspended there, the lipless or the crankbait, or excuse me, the lipless crankbait or the jerkbait will both do well for suspended bass, and to get some activity, to get some response. As far as the spinnerbaits, again, kind of you want to throw that as close you can to cover, to the transitional points between lilies and open water or grass, or any place where you're going to try to pull them coming to and from that shallow water, around piers, around docks, any kind of structure, fallen trees. Let me tell you, if I take my chatterbait, for example, and there's a submerged log or something where I think bass could be suspending, if I reel it in and bang that log, I'll pull it over, stop it. I'll just let it fall to the other side. Oftentimes, on the fall, boom, that's when it'll get hit. As far as the jig, again, we talked about punching through, but you're just gonna heavily weeded mats. You're gonna really just focus on the holes. You'll see what I'm talking about when you're out there. Any holes, you're just gonna try to pinpoint those holes, drop it in. If it's like thick grass where underneath that, because that grass is floating underneath, is like canals where the bass can swim. you need to punch through that. So use that heavy weight, it'll punch right through, and now it's in we'll call it the bass alley. And jig it a couple times. If there's no one on that street, pull it up, go to another street and try it again. Anyway, that's how you're going to pitch and work and punch the jig. Now, another point I need to make this time of year is the weather patterns. Because although it's not hot yet in Florida, we have warm days, but we also have cool days. If the temperature outside is cooled down enough, it's going to affect the bass. They're going to pull back to the deeper water. If it warms up, if we have a warming trend where it starts to increase the temperature of the water, keep in mind the first 3 inches are always going to be highly susceptible to temperature change. We're talking about 2 or 3 feet down. What's the water temperature? But as that starts to increase, the bass get more active and they're going to start pulling into the shallows. You want to trigger those days, but you want to make sure that you follow and you pay attention to what temperature it is outside, any changes in temperature, especially as cold fronts and warm fronts start moving through. On the sunny days, you focus on the shallow water, and you're going to be using more of the reactionary baits like spinner baits or the chatter baits, something that they're going to see and just react to. On the cloudy days, where I prefer to fish in the cloudy days myself, everything works better on the cloudy days. We, as anglers, as fair weather anglers, I prefer to fish when it's sunny and beautiful out. Not too hot, not too cold. 72 degrees, perfect, right? Unfortunately, those aren't normally ideal conditions to catch bass. So the cloudier it gets, especially if there's a little bit of wind, a little bit of turbulence on top of the water, that's a good day to go bass fishing. So if it's real sunny, it's real bright, you can see, especially if the water's clear, you can see where they're bedding. You can actually start to pinpoint. You can throw on the beds. You can throw the creature baits, drag it across, make them angry to where the point where she grabs it, takes off with it to get it out of her nest, set the hook, and bring that big girl in. Please release her. But yeah, it's fun, and you can catch serious lunkers on beds. Me, I like to just play with the males because they're the much more active. They're patrolling the area there, and they're easier to catch. Just want to rehash what we talked about, right? So I just showed you 5 lures that today, March 8th, 2025, will work to catch bass here in Florida. I talked about where to find them, how to fish them, techniques to use, the speed in your retrieval, everything. So I guess I should mention too, the lipless, the jerk bait, those are going to be something I probably throw on a spinner with some mono or fluoro line. The jigs, even the chatterbait probably, depending, but for sure the jig is going to be on a bait caster, heavy, medium heavy, 7-foot rod with braid, because you're punching into junk and you're trying to pull that bass back out through it. So you need something with some backbone to set the hook, backbone to pull it out, and the braid so it doesn't snap. So on the spinnerbait, the jerkbait, and the lipless crankbait, mono, fluoro, something with a little give, something with a little play, something you can feel a little bit more. Those are good. Those are good. And like I said, I typically throw it on a spinner rod, something that's got a little more play, like a medium, so I can get a little bit more play with a little less effort. If I put it on a medium heavy or a bait caster, well, especially medium heavy, I tend to, just those little twitches tends to exaggerate the movement that I want to happen. So those are the reels and those are the rods that I would use for this assortment of lures. I went out 2 days ago, threw Wacky Rig, worked like a champ. I'm telling you right now in Florida, this will work. So if you're coming down, especially if you're in St. Augustine, around that area, drop me a line, dude. I'd love to meet you. Maybe we can go out, get some fish together, have a good time. Anyway, I'm Old Man. Please, if you like it, subscribe. I'm almost at 100 subscribers, so doing pretty good. I'm pretty proud of the effort and the support that I'm getting. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you guys on the water. Wish you nothing but the best. Stay safe. We'll catch you next time.